A new report out tonight says billions of dollars in federal contracts meant to help small businesses are actually being awarded to some of the largest corporations in the world. A congressional investigation finds that last year, a long list of corporate giants got deals earmarked for the little guys. ABC's John Cochran reports on how these household names are getting richer with your money.
Do these look like small businesses to you? Or these? Well, they did to the government, which handed out fat contracts that were supposed by law to go to small businesses.
When you look at Microsoft, Google, all those companies, they were never small. They didn't have any right to accept any contract that was supposed to go to a small business.
The government awarded small business contracts to some real heavyweights. Microsoft got $475,000. General Electric got $1.9 million. Home Depot got $2.3 million. AT&T got $5 million. Northrop Grumman got $90 million. Susan Hughes runs a small business out of her Virginia home. She lost out on a government contract that went to a large company.
I am here today because I want to prevent, if possible, any other small businesses from being victimized by this fraud as my company continues to be.
Big companies insist they did not intentionally try to take contracts away from small ones, and that maybe they got some contracts because of clerical errors by the government.
A spokesman for Walmart said, "People have called us a lot of things, but they've never called us a small company."
Investigators found some small businesses that did get government contracts either grew much larger or were purchased by larger firms, which kept the contracts. Congress is considering legislation with heavy penalties for any company that misrepresents its size.
It's a matter of fairness. It's a matter of the law.
Today's report says small firms lost $12 billion to the big boys. $12 billion of your money. John Cochran, ABC News, Washington.
You might think that the name Small Business Administration would be a clear description of what that government agency does, support small businesses and make sure that they get a fair share of federal contracts. Well, not quite. We have a story tonight that Cheryl Atkinson has been tracking for almost 2 years, and here's her latest.
As the new head of the Small Business Administration was sworn in today, Democrats on Capitol Hill were suggesting a new name for his agency, maybe something like the Big Business Administration. That's because so many government contracts intended for small firms are going instead to some of the biggest corporate names in America. According to an investigation by Democrats on the House Small Business Committee, last year a hefty $12 billion in federal contracts were given to, if you can believe it, names like Microsoft, Rolls-Royce, and Walmart, 2,500 big businesses in all. How can that happen? A big part of the problem is mega corporations somehow getting labeled as small on SBA lists or contract applications. SBA's Calvin Jenkins says they're investigating, but most of the problems can be chalked up to innocent errors.
We don't believe we've seen any intentional wrongdoings on the part of firms to certify themselves as small when they're really large.
Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez insists the SBA has got to know better. Do you think a good percentage of this is just honest mistakes, or do you think this is fraud?
When they see the name Rolls-Royce or Microsoft, if that doesn't ring the bell, if that doesn't tell them that they are large corporations, come on.
The big losers, tiny firms like Sindra Stokes Company, Federal Edge in California, grand total 8 employees.
Small business is actually a little bit too big of a name for us. I tend to call us micro business.
Incredibly, her firm once lost out on a contract meant for small business to a billion-dollar corporation with 700 employees. She eventually won an expensive appeal, something most little firms can't afford to pursue. We contacted some of the big businesses. They all said they never claimed to be mom and pop shops and blame clerical errors or say they got the contracts fair and square through their small business partners.
Every year, billions of dollars in government contracts intended for small businesses go instead to large corporations. The result is billions of dollars in losses for those small businesses, the biggest source of jobs in this country, by the way. And the reason? A classic Washington mix of lax oversight, bad policy, and poor management. Bill Tucker has the report.
Microsoft, Boeing, Google, Time Warner. All are small businesses, according to the U.S. government, which awarded these companies and 62 more just like them contracts as small business.
We are talking about the Microsoft of the world and the Rolls-Royce and Lockheed Martin that has no business in getting contracting dollars that are supposed to go to small businesses.
It's a practice that cost small businesses an estimated $12 billion in 2005 and hurt small business owners like Belinda Guadarrama, who owns a small computer hardware and software company.
When we get a government contract, we hire more individuals from our local communities. We give back into the communities. We're actually supporting the local economies.
She says there's a simple reason why Washington's competitive landscape favors larger businesses.
Small businesses, we're not really organized well enough to be lobbying that strongly. I think clearly when you look at who has the attention of Congress and the government, it's probably the large corporations.
The Inspector General for the Small Business Administration, the agency which advises the federal government on these rules, says numerous issues are to blame. Regulatory loopholes allow companies that have grown or have been acquired by larger corporations to count as small businesses and hold on to long-term contracts for up to 20 years. Fraud is another component. But one of the biggest reasons is bureaucratic error. Administrators marking contracts to big businesses as having gone to small businesses. The SBA denied a request for an on-camera interview, but a spokesman defended their record of advocating for small business.
And the Small Business Administration did announce an important rule change in November requiring that all small businesses now must recertify their status as small businesses every 5 years instead of every 20, as the old rule allowed, Lou.
5 years?
5 years.
Well, that seems to leave a lot of room still, doesn't it?
Well, they want them to grow, Lou. The logic is we don't want to punish a small business to grow. It's certainly better than 20 years.
Yeah, I'll give them that. Bill?
In other news tonight, they are called the engine that drives the American economy. Small businesses provide jobs for more than half of the nation's workforce.
Billions of your tax dollars are set aside to help small businesses survive. Tonight, investigative reporter Stephen Stock digs deeper to reveal the truth behind those numbers.
We discovered hundreds of millions of your tax dollars set aside and meant for small businesses instead going to huge corporations, including dozens of big companies right here in Silicon Valley. It's a huge pot of cash, up to $422 billion worth of federal contracts set aside last year alone, meant to give small businesses a shot at servicing one of the largest clients in the world, the federal government. The government's goal to give at least 23% of all federal contracts to small business. Instead, year after year, we found the government falling short of that goal.
What shocks me is it's still going on.
Lloyd Chapman founded the American Small Business League in 2003, in part because he says big government contracts go to big business rather than to the little guys.
It's not random occurrences when every day for a decade, millions of dollars a day in federal contracts that by law should be going to small businesses are winding up in the hands of not only the largest corporations in America, but in Europe and even Asia.
Donato Polinone has struggled to land federal government contracts.
It's far, far easier to sell into even a General Motors than it is to the federal government.
After founding New Gentech in Emeryville in 1997, Polinone's company now employs 42 workers with earnings of just under $15 million a year. The definition of a small business, according to the Federal Small Business Administration.
It's a topic that only, I'd say about 10% of the other owners of businesses that I know even discuss. Most of the small business owners I know won't even bother trying to sell into the federal government.
After years of trying and failing, New Gentech finally landed several million-dollar contracts with the U.S. government. But to Polinone and his business partner, Fred Pormazai, navigating the federal bureaucracy was like running a gauntlet.
It is frustrating. They're undersourced, understaffed, and they don't have resources to allocate to qualify small businesses like us.
We mined the federal procurement data system, the government's own figures, and found dozens of huge Silicon Valley companies have received contracts marked for small business. Take a $4.8 million Department of Energy contract awarded to a company whose parent is IBM, or a $1 million contract with the IRS going to Oracle. or a $550,000 Forest Service contract to Microsoft. Under SBA size standards, none of those companies qualify as a small business.
You get mad.
Raul Espinoza got so mad over this issue, he founded the Fairness in Procurement Alliance in Jacksonville, Florida.
Government and elected officials are not allowing small businesses to take a fair share of the contracts that they themselves promise for them to have opportunities.
We discovered at least 24 different large companies either based or with major offices in the Bay Area, from Apple to Oracle, IBM to Microsoft, that received at least 299 different contracts labeled small business for a total of $77 million. And that's just since 2009.
It does seem wrong, but that's the way it is.
The Small Business Administration admits this is a problem. Just last week, it released a scorecard showing that it fell short of its goal of giving 23% of all federal contracts to small businesses. The SBA says the reasons for these mistakes, what they call anomalies, range from data entry and coding mistakes to acquisitions of small companies by big companies, which are then grandfathered in, to growth of a company over the life of a contract, to just plain old human error.
So in reality, small businesses are probably getting, I would say, about a tenth of what they're supposed to get.
Of the dozens of contracts we examined closely, we found no evidence of any company or government agency intentionally breaking these rules. In an emailed statement, the SBA told us, quote, SBA has no tolerance for fraud, waste, and abuse and takes corrective steps when actionable information comes to light. We also reached out to those companies we mentioned in our report. Most refused comment, while 2 said they do everything they can do to make sure they and their smaller subsidiaries don't get these contracts. You can read their full statements online at nbcbayarea.com/investigations.
Under the law, nearly 1/4 of all federal contracts are supposed to go to small businesses, recognizing the fact that those small businesses make up the engine that drives our economy. But I-Team reporter Karen Anderson discovered the government is dropping the ball on this, allowing huge corporations to grab contracts that are meant for small business.
Each day that we have a success is a success not just for me and my business, it's for, the 30 families that pull a paycheck and are feeding their families.
Janet Cedia owns a small business, Security Construction Services in Hudson, that depends on federal contracts.
So for us, it probably represents 80% of our revenue.
But the I-Team found in Massachusetts tens of millions of dollars in contracts awarded by federal agencies meant for small businesses are actually going to huge Fortune 500 companies. Defense giant Raytheon got $30 million, Global Partners $25 million, Thermo Fisher Scientific $18 million, Boston Scientific $3 million.
Massachusetts small businesses should be getting about $2 billion a year in government small business contracts. They're probably getting maybe 1/4 of that.
Lloyd Chapman, founder of the American Small Business League, says it's a national problem.
I think the American people would be just stunned if they saw what was really happening with these small business contracts.
What's stunning is the U.S. Small Business Administration has known about this for years. We found 10 reports by the SBA Inspector General dating back to 2005, all saying the same thing. Flaws in the system allow large firms to land small business contracts.
If President Obama would stop the government from diverting small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms, it would put more money into the middle class and create more jobs than any economic stimulus program that President Bush or President Obama ever put forth.
In a statement, the SBA says it believes it is essential that the benefits of small business government contracting opportunities flow to the intended recipients. Janet Cedia, for one, isn't buying it.
It feels a little hopeless, like will they ever be able to solve it?
SBA officials blame an array of bureaucratic challenges, including federal agencies that mislabel large companies as small businesses, as well as simple human error. For the I-Team, Karen Anderson, WBZ News.
Well, according to the SBA, last year, small businesses received $91 billion out of a total of $442 billion in federal contracts.